welcome to another issue of BlatherCast Comics, the YouTube channel about comic books, pop culture, and other stuff. Yeah, I'm Johnny.
And I'm Dave.
Oh, I thought you'd go with Davey since I went with Johnny.
No way.
No way? Davey's lame or what?
No, it's just not me. Actually, always introduce myself as David, but everyone just calls me Dave. So then I just kind of say that, yeah, my name's Dave. You know, just...
Yeah, I used to introduce myself as something else, and now I just go by John.
I call you John, but everyone else calls you something else.
Right, but it got... yeah. That's right.
So this week, or today I did on Twitter, was that hashtag my comic book origin, which I was getting people to tell me about their first experiences with comics, like the first time they bought it or the first time they really got hooked on comics. And I've never heard your story, John. Ever.
So I was on a couch my first time with this young lady, and we were spooning.
Wait, is this a comic book story?
Well, so her mom was in the other room, and we were curled up with a nice issue of Superman. No. So my first the first book I bought was a Spider-Man annual, and I got it at the local drugstore. And it was tough getting comics when I was a kid because, my mom just thought they were a waste of money, and we weren't rich or anything. And but when I really started reading them was later in life. But I did have that whole set of the Marvel Masterpiece books that Joe Jusko had painted that were just like blown up copies of the cards. Mm-hmm. Which I had no idea that was even the case when I was a kid, because I never saw the cards anywhere.
Right, yeah, I mean, you're a kid, you just thought it was a book of pictures, right? So it's like...
Well, and I lived in a small town. I mean, there was no comic books. I mean, there wasn't a comic book store. It was the drugstore or the grocery store, and that was it.
Yeah, I think I got first introduced to his cards and his art through those books too, because I had those comics that were just all his cards when I was a kid, and I didn't realize that he had cards until later.
Right. I mean, the 90s was a really weird time for collecting anything.
Well, we didn't have internet really, right? Especially that early.
I mean, you wanted to find the value of something. They had you remember you could get a price guide for just about anything in a magazine type, big fat magazine type format at almost any store. Be like baseball card, and you could get a baseball card price book, and it would have all the most popular, might not be a full guide, but you could pick one up anywhere, because it was such a market at the time. And it was crazy going to a card shop, and those are even hard to find anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we used to have Wizard magazine for comic books. And they would have a price guide. It wasn't a full price guide, obviously, because it would, even back then, it would still be really, really thick, like a phone book thick. But we used to have a price guide, a monthly price guide in Wizard magazine, and that would tell you all that. And then it would be oh, this book is getting hot, or this. And you got all your news from Wizard magazine. You didn't even get it on the internet. You got it from, you're oh, this got optioned for a movie. or they would do like casting call, and they'd be like, this is who we want to see play, you know, Superman or Wolverine or whatever. That was actually a really fun magazine. And then you could actually see the pictures of the artists and writers. They would be like top 10 artists, top 10 writers, and you get a picture of them, and you'd be like, oh, look, there's Greg Capullo, you know, and stuff like that. So you'd know who these guys were, because if you weren't going to conventions, well, you really want to know what these guys look like.
Right. I mean, I've been to conventions. Maybe it's better that I don't know what they look like. I'm kidding.
Why?
I'm kidding. It's just a joke.
We've been to conventions together. We've been to a couple of them, right?
Yes, and there are no. I can't recall any ugly artists and writers, to be honest. I was just making a joke.
Now you're making it sound worse.
They're all handsome.
They're all handsome and beautiful.
Yes.
So, like, the first time I went and got a comic book was with my grandmother. We went to a grocery store, and I think I was looking at the spinner rack, and she was like, "Oh, do you want a comic book?" And I think that was the first time. I believe it was a Spectacular Spider-Man. Not sure what issue, but around that time, it was X-Men: The Animated Series was going on too, and that got me hooked. Like, I love that series. I love those cartoons. I loved all the characters, and that really got me to going. Every time I would go to the grocery store, I was picking up a comic, mostly X-Men, and that really got me started. And then I picked up Spider-Man and Avengers and those guys. I didn't say this before, but I really wasn't into DC comics. I would get some DC comics, but I really like Green Lantern. And it wasn't until later, I think I was right out of high school, in 2004, 2005, they did Green Lantern Rebirth, and that was by Jeff Johns and Ethan Van Sciver. And they did that bringing back Hal Jordan as the main Green Lantern in the DCU, and that series was awesome. And that got me back into DC Comics, or got me into DC Comics probably for the first time on a full-time basis. And I got a bunch of different comics like Justice League and Superman and all that.
Yeah, I mean, when I really started reading comics, I was in my mid to late 20s, and it was on the recommendation of Sean on the One Up podcast, which was a video game podcast. And he was talking about how great The Walking Dead is. And I remember when I bought the first 2 volumes, I actually got them on eBay. And there were people bundling like the first 12 issues or something in floppies, and like so cheap, and it's like, I wish I would have bought those. But
I know, right?
I got autographed copies of the first 2 volumes, and those were dirt cheap. I paid like $8 a piece for them, I think. But then my next book was Fell by Warren Ellis and Ben Templesmith. And then Welcome to Hoxford came out shortly after that, which was a series by Ben Templesmith. And
I never read that one, I don't think. No.
It was a horror book. And from there, I think I got Transmetropolitan. I started reading that. And Why the Last Man.
Mm-hmm.
And then they did the New 52 reboot sometime after I had just been collecting trades mostly.
Yeah.
And I dove in head first with that. And then I kind of went out of control. I started reading everything at that point. started picking up a lot of Marvel books. I was getting all the DC stuff, all the Image stuff, and then or not all the, a lot of Image stuff, but then it was like you're reading so much and it's just too much when you're reading all of it like that.
I guess when I was younger, I would follow characters a lot. Like, I always will get, like, you know, now I'll always get, no matter who's writing or drawing, Green Lantern or X-Men, I just, like, get those out of, because I have, like, complete collections, right? I can't break the run. But, like, I never read Captain America before Ed Brubaker took over. And I started getting that. And that was like the Death of the Captain America series, where he dies in Civil War, the Civil War tie-ins. And then they make like Bucky be Captain America for a good long time, actually. And I really liked Ed Brubaker's writing. And then he was writing other things at Marvel. And then he was doing his creator-owned stuff. And like I would go back and I would get like all Ed Brubaker stuff, like Sleeper he did with Wildstorm. He did Incognito and Criminal, and that was from Icon through Marvel's imprint. And then he took all his stuff basically to Image, and he wrote Velvet, a couple one-shots of Criminal, Fatale, Kill or Be Killed that's going on now. So then I just kind of started following creators more than following like who the characters were, because I would know like, oh, I know Ed Brubaker is going to tell a good story, so I'll get whatever. You know, like if you went on Hawkman, I'd be like, I'm getting Ed Brubaker Hawkman because I know it's Ed Brubaker.
Right. So at first you follow characters and then it's following writers.
Yeah, mostly writers, some artists. Like, I mean, I like a lot of art, but mostly writers, I think I would follow.
So I originally was following just writers.
Yeah.
And I kind of liked Ben Templesmith, and I don't know what it was about his art that really, you know, because a lot of people are like, I really like his art, but it's probably because it looks so different from everyone else.
Yeah.
But it was really more about the writers, and Warren Ellis is probably my favorite, but you know, the guy has let me down a few times.
Yeah.
You know, writes half stories a lot, which is disappointing.
Well, like when he's in a story and then he just decides he doesn't want to finish the series anymore. It's like, what? I remember did you get that book, New Universal, when he was doing it for Marvel? And he did like a 6-issue.
What's even worse about that is I got it. So I went into a shop, and it wasn't your shop, but I think I was shopping at your shop at the time, but I was like out of town, and I like to go to different comic book stores when I'm out of town to see what they've got. And I was in Elmira or someplace, and I go into the local shop there, and the guy's like, oh, you like Warren Ellis? You'll love this book, you know? And it was a trade, and I pick it up, and I read it, and then I go to look for the rest of it. And it's like there was nothing else. And I'm like, why would a guy recommend this book that's not finished? I was so mad.
It was a really good story, too. That's the terrible thing about it. It was like, New Universe was like an imprint that they did at Marvel in the 80s, and it kind of went like 2.5 years, maybe 3 years, and it went really nowhere, and the whole line ended up getting canceled. Marvel asked Warren Ellis to do this, or maybe he pitched it, and they came back with, it was called New Universal, and it was the same characters, but like almost like how they did Ultimate Universe. It was like, okay, this is like a new take on this storyline, and he had those 6 issues. There might have been something else that came out after that, like one-shots or something.
There were there were 3 more issues, I think, and this story never got completed though. Anyways,
right, and nothing ever happened after that. So that was done.
Yeah, it was a great story with the White event, and
yeah, it was awesome.
yeah, it was great. So disappointing.
It was disappointing. Oh man, yeah. I mean, at least like you were reading comics when like Kevin Smith did that Spider-Man Black Cat miniseries, and there was like 3 years in between issue 3 and 4 or something.
Yeah, he had. I don't know if I read that after the fact. Like when I got that set. Like, I think I got the first 3 issues, and I actually got those at a shop in Albany. And then I got the last 3 issues, I think, in Canandaigua.
Yeah.
But they were all out by the time that I wanted to read it. And that book was different for a Spider-Man story.
I remember another miniseries when before I owned a store or anything was Ultimate Wolverine versus Hulk or whatever it was called. It might have been Ultimate Hulk versus Wolverine. I don't know. But one of the writers from Lost started to write it as like Damon Lindelof started to write it, and then it was like 4 years in between issues, and they finally wrapped it up. But it was kind of a cool story. And I remember them like when issue 3 was coming back, or issue 4 when they were coming back after the long break. Like they had like mini trades of the first 3 issues because no one could find those.
Terrible. Well, I mean, I can understand if it was a writer for Lost why it took him so long to figure out an ending.
Oh.
Just saying.
Yeah.
I mean, they went, 6 seasons, and that never really ended.
It wasn't, it's funny, it was just like that comic book. It wasn't going anywhere around season 3, and then they finally had a path to where they wanted to go, and then it wasn't really that good.
All right. So, what did you read last week?
Oh man, put me on the spot. I read a lot of things. We talked about Terrifics, that was last week. Talked about Silencer, number 2.
We did not talk about Silencer. I don't think.
I think I mentioned it.
What's that book about?
Silencer is an assassin. She is left that life, and Talia al Ghul kind of drags her back in, and there's this guy after her, and she's trying to get out of this assassin life, or she has been out, but she's trying to get out of it from creeping back into her life, and she's hiding it from her husband and her kid, and she has the power to create these bubbles that are of silence. So you could have this big fight in the middle of her street, and no one would look out the window because they wouldn't hear anything because it's completely silent, but they're having this huge fight in the middle of their neighborhood. I like that book. It's got John Romita Jr. art on it. It's pretty fun.
Well, now that you mention that, I totally remember us talking about it now.
Yeah, I think we did.
It's the 11th book in the I Am Number 4 series. Has somebody who has those same powers in it.
Oh, really?
I know anybody who's seen that movie, it wasn't that great of a... I mean, it wasn't a bad movie, but the book series went on for there's 11, there's 10 books in the main series, and they just started a new series.
Yeah.
Which is kind of like, okay, this all happened, but here's the world now that they're like superheroes. So
I remember a movie coming out of that, and then there was no other follow-up.
Correct. It's on Netflix right now. I Am Number 4. Yep. Yeah, the movie wasn't that good. The book was better, and I don't know. I read all the books. So there were 10 books in the main story, and now there's like the new story starting with like a whole new set of characters. And then there are like 3 or 4 like side books that are kind of one-shots. And the crazy thing about this is that so they used a pen name for the books. So all the books say they're written by the same guy, but it's actually like 6 different writers. And they pump one out every year.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
Yep. The whole idea behind this book, like the whole thing that they were going for, was to pump out like a teen superhero action type movie to cash in like Harry Potter, you know, and Hunger Games, you know. They were like, oh, we can do this, and we can get this big, huge cast of characters, and I Am Number 4 was the beginning, and, like, the movie didn't do well enough to continue on with it, but the books have, and the books just keep coming out. But
that's pretty interesting.
They're not the best, but they're entertaining enough, you know?
Yeah, sure, yeah. I remember a book now that I read, the comic that I read last week, Thanos, number 16. So, like, the story of Thanos right now is present-day Thanos goes into the future and meets older Thanos, him obviously many, many, many years older, and Thanos has won. He has, like, nothing really to accomplish. He has killed everybody and everything, and he's pretty much it. And he still can't get, like, the attention of death, right? And we know that there's somebody coming for Thanos, and he's like, hey, I need younger Thanos' help. And he has this character that is the future Ghost Rider. And the future Ghost Rider is really Frank Castle, who has gone completely insane. And they kind of had shown in this latest issue how Frank Castle became the Ghost Rider and then became the right-hand man of old Thanos. And it was pretty interesting because at first Thanos is going after Galactus, and Galactus had made this new Ghost Rider his herald. And after Thanos defeats Galactus, he's like, hey, do you want to be my right-hand man? He's like, I can't kill you and you can't defeat me, so we might as well team up. So I thought it was a pretty cool thing.
Wow, that's pretty interesting. And is that the end of the series?
I think Thanos is coming to an end. I think this story arc has maybe 2 more issues, and then I think they're going to do an annual. I know the Ghost Rider, the future Ghost Rider story, there's going to be a mini-series on him coming out, and I think I don't know if that's June or July in the summer here, but it's really good. Thanos, since the beginning of that series, they've changed writers now. It used to be Jeff Lemire. He did the first 12, and now Donny Cates is writing this story arc. It's been really good, like really, really good.
That sounds really good.
Yeah, it's definitely fun.
Do you think they'll make a omnibus out of it, or am I going to have to buy?
There's going to probably be just trades. I don't know if they're going to do one big collection. They probably will down the line, but you know how that goes. They usually take their time.
Yeah, they want to soak every dime out of you.
Well, they do like the individual issues, then they do the individual trades, and maybe hardcovers of the individual story arcs. Then they do the big, oversized hardcover. You know.
Right. How oversized do you think it'll be? I mean, do they always do the hardcovers? Aren't always extra large pages, right?
No, not always, but I think with something that, like, say if it's 18 issues in an annual, it probably will be. You know, not like Absolute style. You know what I'm saying? Not as big as an Absolute edition like DC does, but like a bigger cut.
Right. Like a giant ribeye.
Like a full slab of ribs.
Yeah, like a giant cut. I'd like the 28-ounce ribeye, please.
There you go.
Thank you. All right.
Now my dog just entered the room.
I think I'm gonna go see Black Panther here tomorrow night. I think.
You haven't seen it yet, right?
No, I've been putting it off because I really wanted to break all the records. So, you know, I figured my $7, it needs to be on a different weekend than all these other record-breaking weekends, so I can attribute to another record-breaking weekend.
I haven't gone yet. I don't know when I will. Maybe soon.
Well, you've been skipping all of them lately.
Skipped all the movies.
Yeah. So I'm not, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if you didn't go see this one. I mean, you missed that critical and fan loved Justice League movie.
The Star Wars one?
No, Justice League. You skipped that one.
You cut out.
I was like, yeah, critically and fan acclaimed. Justice League.
I thought you meant Star Wars. I was like looking at you see the Rotten Tomatoes scores, and it's always like critic scores are really bad with Justice League, but like fan scores aren't so bad. And then like it's the opposite of like Justice or Star Wars. It's like the critic scores are really high for Star Wars, but the fan score is like a 48. It's like, why are they so off? I don't understand.
Well, it's the same with a lot of movies, and it's about like the last 15 years or so. Like, it used to be an Oscar winner, and I know the Oscars has nothing to do with how much money the movie made.
Yeah, that's true.
But it used to be that the Oscar, the Best Picture, was also a big money movie. As in, took in a lot of money, didn't necessarily have a big budget. And now it's like all the movies that make any money, like their only hope of getting an Oscar is in like cinematography or special effects.
Yeah, and it's like the lower ones, like that make like 6 or 7 million, are the ones that get all the awards. Something like that.
Yeah.
Maybe not that low. Obviously not that low, but
although
like, yeah.
the movie that won this year, I actually wanted to go see, and I did.
What was that?
The Shape of Water.
Oh yeah, I didn't see that. I didn't see anything. So yeah.
Well, it's an alien movie, and I think aliens are cool. You know, so
that was like the one with fish sex in it.
Yes. Yep.
Nah.
Yep. I think so. I just know it's like some amphibian dude or something, and I don't know. That's weird, and I want to see it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Gotcha.
I don't know. I know it's a love story, but I'm okay with love stories. I like a love story here and there. The other nominees were like Get Out, and I can't remember any of the other ones because I never hear any of these movies, and I usually don't like I try to watch them after the fact every year.
Yeah.
And I quit doing that like 3 years ago because I'm like, man, all these movies are garbage. Like, I just don't like them.
Yeah, I rarely like any of the things that were like nominated. I think I like don't watch any of them, like hardly ever. I mean, I don't really watch that many movies in the theater anymore anyway, but yeah, I don't. It's weird. I just like have zero interest in a lot of them. I don't know. Movies are weird lately. I'd rather read a book, I guess.
Yeah. I've gotten to the point where I don't even. I'm at the point with books where a lot of people are with movies. And that's where, like, it's almost like I only want to read sequels.
Oh, the things that you already enjoy, right?
Right, because I go and I read a book, like, last couple books I've tried, I've gotten, actually one of them was a sequel. When I read the book, I get like a couple chapters in and I'm like, this is garbage, and I'm like, Amazon, give me my money back.
Right.
I'm like,
right.
I could just, and normally I would have just given the book a shot and listened to the whole thing or read the whole thing, but now I don't. If I don't like it in the first couple of chapters, I want to get something else. It's like,
So I think
yeah.